You're welcome to our SGA event, courtesy Black History Month. This was put together by the Inclusivity Committee as well as the Student Engagement Committee. Joining us today, we have two very impressive and amazing panelists. And I believe that after this Zoom meeting and after this meeting, we would actually be educated on what cryptocurrency is, and we can actually understand that financial system. So I have with me Mr. Chris Moose and Mr. Chike Ukaegbu. Over to you, Chris.
Great. Well, thank you for having me here today, and really looking forward to spending about 20 to 30 minutes with some opening comments on cryptocurrencies, what's going on in the market, also putting it somewhat in context of what happened during the Super Bowl when we saw the Coinbase giveaway that has a lot of Americans now signing up and participating in the crypto economy. So without any further delay, I will go ahead and jump into it. And I believe we'll have some time for questions at the end of this. So I look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts. What I do is I'm a partner within IBM's professional services organization, and I help organizations as they think through what does the emergence of Web3 crypto economy, what does that mean for me? And we advise everyone from governments to private enterprises on these concepts. And what you're going to see are some thoughts that I recently shared with the state government about how the emergence of Web3 and cryptography and cryptocurrencies will have implications for them. So the way I really frame this is I try to put it in terms of what's happening in society, because what we're really seeing are some larger societal changes. And then you can really start to back that into what it means for states and state governments. And so if we break down what's happening in society, well, I think there's a few things that are soon coming towards us. The first thing is that we're going to see a lot of new types of assets, a lot of new digital assets. And those could be financial, like we saw with Coinbase giving away Bitcoin during the Super Bowl, or it could be in artwork, or it could be in music, or any number of different assets. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. As you think about this diversity of assets that are now becoming digital and digitally exchanged, you're going to start to see some non-traditional players engaging in digitizing the world. So what does that mean? Well, maybe in the past, when we thought about digital and what it meant to live online, it was what we did in the realm of social. It was maybe Facebook, or maybe it was conducting some commerce over Amazon. You're going to start to see that explode dramatically in a lot of new assets and a lot of new participants engaging in the digital economy and exchanging goods, value, information digitally. And with that comes this notion of different characteristics. Historically, things were quite simple in what they were. You bought something, it was an object, you owned it. Now, in the world of digital, these objects can be programmable. You could actually take an asset and say, if this, then that with this asset. You can start to fractionalize ownership of it in ways that historically were just infeasible. And we'll dive into that in a little bit. If you back up and say, okay, well, if that's what's coming, then what's changing to make these things true statements, to make these things possible? Well, the first is that we're starting to see this expectation of digitized life. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we now have generations that have grown up purely online, and their framework, their context for the way the world should operate is very different than mine or people older than me. And that's driving an expectation that in all domains, in all facets of someone's life, that life be much more digital. And again, we'll explore that here in a few minutes. And I already teased a little bit about the fact that you're going to have programmable features in these new assets, be it money, goods, information that's being exchanged. And so I'm going to conclude each of these sections with a little bit of what to do, what to think about going forward. The first thing is I think identity is going to increasingly become important, and we continue to see a battle over identity. Apple is trying to establish their ecosystem as the future of digital identity, and you see them partnering with the Transportation Safety Administration so that you can digitize your driver's licenses and use it to get on a plane. They're trying to use that as a toehold. other organizations, Facebook, log in with Google, things like that. They're all trying to own identity because it is the anchor of everything that's about to happen. You're going to start to have to think through wallets and how do you store and custody and manage your digital assets. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that. And there's a whole slew of second order implications that are going to spin out of this. And we'll talk about that as well. But let's kick off our first section here that's really anchored on this notion of new asset types and what that's going to mean we need to be doing differently. To understand this notion of new asset types, it's important to understand this new terminology that's coming forward. You might hear people talking a lot about Web3, and everyone's just kind of adopted it as a word, but no one has really taken the time to make sure that we're all grounded in the same understanding of what does Web3 mean. So let's define this in terms of what we've all experienced and what people have grown up. So the first thing that happened is you had this notion of Web 1, and it was you would go to a static website, you would read it, you would go to maybe CNN.com or BBC.com or some kind of a newspaper, and it was an online thing that you would read, and you didn't really interact with it, you just read it. And that was Web 1. Web 2 was the social web. That's when you're taking pictures of your family, of your nights out on the town, and you're posting them on Facebook, on Twitter. Maybe you're doing something on Instagram, but it's this notion of social, where instead of one person publishing and a lot of people reading, all of us publish and all of us read and all of us interact. And that's the social web. And that was Web 2. What Web 3 is it takes it one step further and you start to infuse artificial intelligence and decentralization into Web 2. This is where it gets really exciting. What if instead of Facebook or Twitter or some of these big centralized gatekeepers controlling how you interact with the web, what if that was decentralized? What if there was no gatekeeper? What if each of us could be our own publisher, could do our own thing, and we really couldn't be censored? That's what Web 3 enables. And so if you look at that and you start to think about, okay, what are the companies and the generations, ages that experience this? So in Web 1, you really had the browsers. And I think that's probably predating a lot of us here on the phone, or at least it was our first interaction with the web, because you were probably Gen X, about 23 years old, and you really grew up in this era of the browser. Millennials probably weren't really using the computer, and Gen Z, they weren't even born yet. You take that one step forward. Now I think we're talking about companies and actions that everyone on this call probably experienced. It's your Facebook, it's your Airbnbs, it's your Ubers. It's when you could really interact, transact with the web. It was a much more social experience. You can see down at the bottom, generationally, how that played out. So Gen X is now making kind of their second major technology step forward. They're now about 30 years old. They saw the static web, and now they're seeing the web interact with. Millennials, this is probably really their first interaction with technology. They're about 14, early teenage years. And they're growing up with these companies. These companies always existed in their frame of reference. And Gen Z, they're watching their brothers, their sisters, their parents interact with these tools. So they're cognizant of them. They maybe don't use them, but they at least know they exist. Take that into Web 3. Now you can see all of these new companies that are really starting to come online. You've got financial instruments like Bitcoin. You've got new ways of wiring value and conducting transactions with Ethereum. And you can see generationally, this is something that everyone's experienced. Now, Gen X, this is maybe pretty hard for them because this is their third major shift, and it's getting harder and harder, in their opinions, to keep up with technology, but they're going to make it. They're going to understand these things. Millennials, this is their second change. So this doesn't seem all that big a stretch from what they grew up with. And Gen Z, this is their jam. They grew up in this. They don't know any other world. And if you put this now in context of like some states and how some states are skewing younger than others, if you look at a state like Louisiana, that means basically 20% of the population only is growing up in this Web3 world. So they're going to expect everything to operate in this Web3 mentality. Millennials, that's another 25, 26% of the state of Louisiana. So between just those two demographics, you now have almost half of Louisiana has grown up either Web 2 or Web 3 native. And that's why expectations are changing and people want the world to look different. And so what does that mean? That means people are going to live their lives digitally and online. They're going to live primarily in this Web 3 or Web 4, whatever that turns out to be, era. And so establishing identity so that we can interact in this new world is going to be incredibly important. There's a lot of regulations around know your customer, banking regulations that are going to start to get applied to Web3, where you have to know who the counterparty is you're interacting with, and that your funds or whatever you're doing aren't being used by a criminal enterprise or a terrorist organization, things of that nature. These are all historical financial problems that are now becoming web problems, and it's all anchored in having access to this notion of identity. The other thing that's a little bit more upbeat that I would point out is some of the tax that like a Visa or a MasterCard or any kind of a network has historically imposed. Those are going to get rethought. And I realize our next speaker represents a little bit of that, and that's good, because I'm sure they're thinking through in this new world, how can they rethink their business model? Because technology is fundamentally deflationary. It costs less to do stuff today than it did yesterday. And that's through the power of tech. And Web3 and cryptography is bringing deflationary pressure to the financial industry, which means people are going to have more resources going to them versus going to the financial industry. And I think that's a net positive. So let's now pivot over to the next thing, which is this notion about you're going to see a lot of non-traditional financial players. So if you take this notion of Web3 and you play it out, what's the trajectory? What's going to start happening next? Well, it's more than money. And this is really important for people to keep their eye on. Yes, at the top of everyone's mind is Bitcoin. It's going to be Ethereum. It's the latest token. It's Dogecoin. There's any number of things. But there's so much more going on than just financial instruments when you move into the digital realm. This concept of non-fungible tokens, what does that mean? It means a unique asset. A dollar bill is fungible. If I have a dollar bill and you have a dollar bill and we trade, neither of us really care. If I have a copy of the Mona Lisa and you have a drawing that your child made, I'm not going to trade you. Those are non-fungible. The Mona Lisa and someone else's artwork are not the same thing, even though they're art. And this is the definition of non-fungible versus fungible. This is why art in this notion of non-fungible tokens is so important. And it's kind of a very different iteration than what you see going on right now with money. So when you look at a company like Royal.io, which is doing some fascinating things in the music industry and almost bringing a patron model where you can sponsor artists, you can have a portion of the royalty on the song that they create, and that becomes an annuity stream of royalties. That's a really cool concept, and it's anchored on this concept of a non-fungible token because not every song is equal. Some songs are going to be hits, some songs are going to be duds, and you got to keep track of which is which, and you want to own the ones that are hits. Also, what you see going on in the art community with OpenSea, all this is anchored together. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into this concept of DAOs, but it's basically a decentralized autonomous organization. And if you were to think about, do you still need companies on the web? You do, but they're going to look very different. And that's really kind of what a DAO is it's taking what used to be a company and turning it into a series of programming rules. But again, that's a whole different topic that we won't dive into today. What I do want to focus a little bit on, though, is what's going on just with money, because what Coinbase did during the Super Bowl is really introducing a lot of us to this concept of the digital world. And there's two different things that are going on here. One is something Coinbase, the platform, and think of that basically like a bank. And the other is Coinbase, the wallet. Okay. And I like to basically sum it up as, if you got something in Coinbase, the platform, it's like it's in a bank. They are responsible. Coinbase are responsible for how your assets are secured, managed, etc. Coinbase, the wallet, is kind of like taking money out of the bank and putting it under your mattress. You're going to control it yourself. You're going to put it in your physical wallet. You're going to carry it around and do something with it. You are self-custodying your wallet, your money. You're responsible for it yourself. If you lose it, it's your problem. And this is a really important concept as you look at the non-fungible tokens and all these other ideas that are coming to fruition. There's going to be custodians like Coinbase, the application, that take care of your assets for you and look a lot like a bank. There's going to be non-custodian, which is going to be when you take stuff out of the ATM and you carry it with you. You have it in your wallet. And there's an interesting nuance as you look at government services that starts to come into play here. And again, in the interest of time, I won't deep dive this, other than just saying there's all sorts of fascinating property right questions that are going to happen. What happens when someone dies? What happens when someone loses their stuff? We have a very long history of property rights and inheritance and everything else that dictates how assets move between people when you have these life events, be it loss, death, any number of things, lawsuits, et cetera. Those are going to have to be rethought in the digital world. And I think we're still trying to figure out what that looks like. And it's important that we understand what has historically happened in the physical world may not be exactly what happens in the digital world. It's a really big statement. And again, not quite enough time to unpack that, but just something to keep in mind. You've got things that look a little bit like banks. You've got things that don't look like banks. And you shouldn't assume that the same protections you have in the physical world extend to the digital world. This is just a really quick example about how quickly some of this stuff is taking off. If you look at the user growth of just one platform, of just Coinbase, and you look at it over, about 3 years, you can see that it's almost tripled in the number of users. So you went from 23 million to 73 million users. And this is just dealing with financial instruments. And this is just one of the many exchanges that are out there. So I think it's important to understand this is happening. This is taking off and it's moving very, very quickly. And to underscore how quickly it's moving, I would again tie you back to the Super Bowl ad. When Coinbase ran this in the Super Bowl, they jumped to number 2 in the Apple App Store. People are curious about this. People are adopting this. People are installing these tools and running with them. And so what does that mean? Well, it means you really need to start to understand how you're going to secure your digital assets. Again, you've got Coinbase, which functions a little bit like a bank, and any number of their peers that custody your assets for you. And you've got this other concept of a wallet, which is where you're responsible for your own stuff. And you can't assume that a Bitcoin, an instrument of money, and a piece of art, a non-fungible token, or a song, you don't store all those things the same way. Some you can store on an exchange like Coinbase, some you've got to store in a wallet. And there's a lot that we're going to continue to have to educate society at large about those two concepts. Which brings me to my third and final theme of today's discussion. And it's really this question about what's coming. You're going to see stuff that historically is unlike anything we've been able to do before, because in the world of crypto, you can create micro markets. Things that were historically never economically feasible to do are going to become feasible to do. So what does that mean? Well, there's an interesting concept out there called the basic attention token. And really what it is people have realized you can monetize your time. When you go to a website and it takes forever to load, part of that is because that website is saying, I have a new visitor. Who wants to offer me the most money to display ads on the side and across the top? And that website is free because they are running a real-time bid to get results back to decide which ads they're going to display to you. And that money goes to the website. Again, that's why the web is free. And that's why some people say the original sin of the internet is that it ended up being ad-based. What if instead of the website gathering that value for you reading the article and then monetizing your eyeballs and the sides of your screen, what if you, the user, got that? And that's what the basic attention token does, is it says, when I visit a website, I'm going to have advertisers pay me this basic attention token, a cryptocurrency, effectively a cryptocurrency, for the privilege of me seeing their advertisements. And this is kind of a big idea. And again, it's because something that historically was never possible is now feasible in this Web3 world. You could never really create a model where every single person on this Zoom meeting could have a financial relationship with an advertiser, get a unique ad, and be paid based on that unique ad showing up and you seeing it for 1, 3, 5, 15 seconds, whatever the time amount is. But with Web3, with cryptocurrencies, with tokens, you can create a market down to an individual person, which again, historically has never been possible before. That's why you had websites like CNN or BBC aggregating viewers and then selling the rights, the impressions of so many viewers, because they had to do it in mass. You had to do it in orders of thousands or millions. Now you can do it on a scale of individual web visitors. And this notion of new instruments and new things that we're monetizing is a really big idea. And so because crypto can allow us to do these micro incentive payments, micro payments, you're going to start to see a whole lot more value circulating the web. And it's going to be in much smaller increments, and it's going to get lost. It's going to be questions, again, of inheritance. Who owns it? Who does it move to next? And as people start to monetize data, because really what we're doing is we're monetizing information about me, about my interests. As people monetize that data, who gets to own it when I die? Is it subject to privacy? Maybe I don't want my kids to realize some of the things that I looked at on the web when I was growing up. So how do you look at the value and the digital legacy that I leave behind and all these value payments that might be coming off of me? My closing point here is this is going to be really interesting when we think about healthcare. If you can monetize my attention on the web, think about what happens if you could monetize my healthcare information. And maybe I've got some kind of a rare genetic disease that's valuable to researchers, and they want to know how many steps did I take. So they're going to pull my Fitbit or my Apple Watch data. They're going to look at what I ate. So they're going to pull my map, my health type data. And they're going to look at my genomic stuff. So they're going to go to my doctor and pull that. All these are things that are useful for a researcher and are monetizable for me as an individual, but what happens to it and how do you protect the privacy over time? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up my portion of the comments by just saying, once again, I think you're going to start to see entirely new assets come online in the crypto world that historically we have not. You're going to see it from players that you've never seen before, and they're going to have assets, characteristics, problems that we really haven't had to work through in society to date. And with that, I will turn back my my time and my mic to you all, and I'll stick around for questions afterwards. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was really educative. I do have a lot of questions, but of course, I would like to call on the next panelist, Chike Ukaegbu, for his section of the presentation. Over to you.
Hi, thank you for that. Chris, that was brilliant. I think you did an excellent job of practically explaining, Crypto 101. In fact, I would call that Crypto pre-101, right? That was great. Hi, everyone. My name is Chike Ukaegbu. I am currently the head of crypto strategy for emerging markets at Visa. And as you can tell, with the session before mine, crypto is exciting, right? Especially for large payment companies like Visa, right? And for the last 60 years, we have focused on being able to facilitate transactions from one end to the other, right? In ways that have been stable until newer technologies spring up and then start to disrupt the ecosystem. And for you to thrive, for you to survive, it means you have to be able to adapt to the times, right? That's why you have Visa Crypto. I'm not going to go ahead and repeat everything Chris has said. I'll probably just focus a little bit more on what we do, where we think the space may be going. And then, of course, use cases in emerging markets. I am extremely excited, extremely passionate about emerging markets because I think they have they usually have the opportunity to leapfrog in terms of newer technologies than many developed markets. So before jumping into that, we look at crypto from 4 or 5 different categories, right? We've talked about the speculative tokens, the Bitcoins, the Ethereums, the ones that you all know about, right? And then you also have stable coins. Stable coins are digital currencies that are pegged to fiat. It could be dollar, it could be euro. In some cases, natural resource, diamond, gold, it depends, right? And all that means is the value of your digital currency that's pegged to that fiat has the exact same value. So for instance, you have USDC, you have DAI, you have GUSD, you have USDT. There's several stable coins, and they all have the exact same value as the dollar, with some variations. We'll not go into all of that, but technically that's what a stable coin is. Then another category is CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, right? Central bank digital currencies are digital currencies controlled by states or governments, central banks. For some, based on some of the research that's going on in the market, for some, they consider it a digital version of their fiat currency, right? For some others, they consider it a digital currency on the blockchain. There's a lot of thought leadership. There's a lot of research going on in the space. I believe IBM actually is very active in the space as well. And all we try to do is help governments think through what would work best for their nations, right? In developing and launching and making sure that people adopt central bank digital currencies. And then of course you have NFTs, which Chris has done a great job of explaining, non-fungible tokens. I think NFTs present, or at least present us an opportunity of creating a whole new asset class in terms of commerce, right? Now you have artists, you have creators being able to become merchants, right? They can now sell their goods or their services or their talents directly to people. In emerging markets, I think it would even go much more than that. I think today when we talk about NFTs, it's mostly in gaming, in art, in collectibles. In emerging markets, I think that would open up a little bit more to more practical use cases, whether it's in land ownership or even education or healthcare. If you can create unique value, you can literally tokenize that and turn it into NFTs, right? I've come across startups that are, I think there's a startup that would tokenize a physical asset and collateralize that for you to give you a loan, right? So if you have a piece of land, you can they tokenize that, put it on the chain, and then can offer you a loan based on that, right? So there's so many people. There's another startup I know that's just called Cattle Pass, and they're turning practically the entire life cycle of cattle into NFTs, such that when you buy meat, you can actually get to see the entire life cycle of that piece of meat, right? So there's so many people doing so many brilliant things in this space. That's exciting. And then of course the other category is DeFi, decentralized finance, and Chris touched on the other one, DAOs, right? Decentralized autonomous organizations, right? So these are the different ways that, or the different categories of crypto or blockchain technologies that we've been looking at, and asking ourselves, how do we make life easier for the end user in this new dispensation, if I can say that, right? But also more importantly, how do we make it easier for you to engage in the ecosystem? The same way you very subconsciously can use your phone to purchase something, or can use your Visa card or MasterCard or Amex or Discover card to make purchases, to make payments. The question is, how do we enable you to spend or to buy crypto, right? So it's called on-ramping and off-ramping, right? From crypto to fiat and vice versa. So for those of you who already have accounts at Coinbase or crypto.com, you will realize that many of them now issue cards, right? Visa cards that you can use to spend your crypto, right? So we are ramping up on that, making sure that especially in emerging markets where crypto adoption is extremely high, that we're able to create that ease of use for them to be able to use and spend their crypto. Especially if you look at I don't know how many of you that know about Axie Infinity. Axie Infinity is what you call a play to earn platform. In this case, you play and you earn NFTs and you can sell them back, to make money or crypto. And it was launched in the Philippines, and during COVID, it was completely intergenerational. Like, you had young people, you had people as old as 70 and 80 playing the game, because for them, that was how they were able to put food on the table, right? So the practical use cases of crypto in emerging markets, like I've talked about, is what excites me. It's in fact part of the reason why I am in this space, right? When you look at a country like Nigeria, whose currency has been devalued 7 or 8 times in the last 3 years, for many people, crypto becomes, that medium for them to preserve value, right? For them to do trade. For those who purchase goods from places like China or Vietnam, it's easier for them to pay using Bitcoin, right? I can just send Bitcoin from my wallet to the seller's wallet, than having to do a bank transfer that would take 21 days and cost extremely, the costs are usually extremely expensive, right? So there's so many reasons. For those, there was a protest in Nigeria in 2020, NSAS protest, where the government decided to freeze the bank accounts of some of the leaders. And crypto became the way where, Nigerians in the diaspora were able to sponsor these peaceful protests and to meet some of the needs of these protesters, right? So several other reasons, remittances, for those in the diaspora to send money home. Crypto is an easy and cheaper way than doing the MoneyGrams and the Western Unions, right? So there are several practical use cases of crypto in emerging markets, which for me is what's exciting. Of course, it could facilitate financial inclusion, right? I say this though, I tell people, crypto will not close the wealth gap, because the truth is, if I have if I have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, and some other person has $1 million worth of Bitcoin, or rather, if I have $1,000 and somebody else has $1 million, and we both buy Bitcoin, right? When Bitcoin appreciates, if it goes from, say, 10,000 to 20,000, my stuff will appreciate by 2. Same will the person who has put in $1 million. And you get to see that the disparity actually becomes much bigger. So it will, to some extent, maybe even create a wider chasm between different classes. However, the opportunity there is it can also allow a lot of other people, many people who are unbanked, to start to experience financial services. And that's the promise there that I'm excited about. There are a few other things we've been doing. Crypto literacy. How do we make sure that people understand the importance of crypto and people can leverage crypto to their benefit? Whether it's partnering with crypto.com to do airdrops, Bitcoin airdrops at Howard University. We did that last October during homecoming. Or working with different exchanges to or working with different creators. For some of you who remember, V's actually purchased a CryptoPunk last year. And ever since, we've been working on a creator program focused on creators, NFT creators in emerging markets, right? So our goal is to empower people using crypto. And as our world evolves and appreciates Web3 and comes into the metaverse, and all of these brilliant things and exciting things that are happening, we want to be sure that we are there to assist in, making that process easier for everyone. So I'm going to stop here because I know people have a lot of questions. Chris, I hope you're ready to answer questions. And yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm glad you guys are thinking about crypto and hosting such events to evangelize crypto.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chike. So personally, there's so much to unpack here. This is really enlightening and educative. first of all, as an individual, what are the first steps, in getting into the ecosystem? We have a lot of cryptocurrencies. Some coins are actually authentic, while others aren't. From history, we've seen scam artists in the ecosystem. So what are things I need to look out for, before diving into cryptocurrency, so I don't get to lose, at the end of the day?
So I'll take a initial run at that one. And someone early on told me they were buying Bitcoin, and I said, okay, well, why? And they had no reason. They just knew it existed. I said, okay, so you're not really buying it, you're speculating. And I think it's actually might be a quote from Warren Buffett, perhaps. But fundamentally, the point is, if you haven't done enough research to understand why an asset should appreciate, then you're just gambling. And when you can look at something at a coin and say, okay, I understand why Bitcoin's going up, because I believe in the concept of scarcity. I believe how it's a hedge against inflation, and you have a thesis as to why that should be valuable, then I would say go ahead and buy it. You could say the same thing about Ethereum. I would then start to say, okay, well, look at some of these other things that make the news, but seem a little bit weird. Like I'll just pick on Dogecoin, for example. Does anyone really understand why something like that is going to go up in value? And again, if you have a thesis as to why something will be valuable, then I would say, go ahead, purchase it, realize that you might be wrong, but you at least have thought through why this should be worthwhile. If you can't figure out why something should go up in value, or at least hold its value, then I would say don't buy it. And that's really kind of my litmus test for any of the investments I'm making in the crypto space right now.
I completely agree. Research is extremely important, right? Especially as you have more proliferation of tokens out there. And there are actually places where you can research tokens, right? So there's CoinGecko, there's CoinMarketCap, and these are places where if you search any token, it could tell you what the use cases are, it could tell you where you can purchase them, it could tell you the market cap. There's so much information out there that you can use to arm yourself before delving into the purchase of any tokens. Yeah.
While dealing with anything digital, it opens the conversation about hacking. So how secure is, trading, is investing in this ecosystem as a beginner?
So I'll take another opening run at that one. I think the way to approach this, and I hinted at it, but let me expand upon the concept from my half of the presentation, was custodial versus non-custodial. And in my comments, I talked a little bit about how Coinbase in some ways looks like a bank. It's not exactly a bank, but for practical purposes, let's just call it kind of bank-like. The odds of you losing money and being scammed or stolen on Coinbase are much lower than when you self-custody, when you take that money and you store it in your own wallet. Much like if I've got $100 in a bank and I have $100 on me, the bank is probably not going to get robbed. The odds of me being mugged on a street are higher than my bank being robbed. So I think it's important when you start getting into the crypto economy to take it in very simplistic steps. Work with someone like work with Coinbase, work with Gemini. There's a number of large trustworthy platforms out there, and just let them hold on to small amounts of money for you so you can start to get used to what that is. Over time, you can take it off and you can start to carry it with you in more of a self-custody mentality. I would also point out that a lot of the scams that people hear about are phishing, which really is a social engineering thing. And this has been a problem as long as humans have been around, where people try through social engineering to convince you to do something you shouldn't. whether it's invest in the Brooklyn Bridge or any number of things. So it's not that the technology is insecure. The instances of that are fairly few. And even when we have problems with the technology, they tend to sort themselves out. The problem is much more in people being conned into doing something that they shouldn't. And that's, again, that's not necessarily a crypto problem, that's a societal problem.
I completely agree with that, right? So for new starters, for amateurs, like Chris has said, yes, start on an exchange. Even if they do get hacked or whatever, the likelihood that you get your stuff back is higher than if you try to, you know, be your own custody or have a custodial wallet of your own. Not to say that you shouldn't. The other option is a hardware wallet, you know, which you can purchase, and that's not on the internet or digital. You can only use it when you plug it into a laptop or whatever to use it. But as a starter, as a newbie, yes, Coinbase, Gemini, Crypto.com, there's several of them out there that you should start up with, yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So, I mean, with the emergence of cryptocurrency and cryptography and all of that, this is the first time in history that we have engineering impinging on economics and finance. So we have a question from a student, and the student wants to know if a student at Delgado is interested in making a career in what you're doing, what major should she or he consider? Is this engineering? Is this finance? You know, is this economics?
Chris, okay.
I'm gonna let you take the first one at that one.
All right, let's. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's what I say. Passion and hard work is more important, and I'll tell you why. My current VP, the global head of crypto at Visa, studied psychology or sociology rather, right? Sociology, that's what he studied, right? My background is in biomedical engineering, has nothing whatsoever to do with crypto. Now, what you have to understand about the crypto space is there's a lot of opportunity in the crypto space that you can apply whatever background you have into it if you are excited and passionate about it. So I wouldn't worry so much as to what major you should focus on, unless you want to develop. If you now want to be a developer, then that's different, right? Go learn Solidity or whatever else language is relevant for, you know, developing in the ecosystem. But if it's just being a part of or joining the crypto sector, the crypto economy, whatever, passion is what would drive more than whatever your background is. All right.
I completely agree. And I would actually, just expanding upon that, I don't think any of us really know what the best career, or sorry, the best major to study in to really excel at this is going to be. Passion is going to take you very, very far. I actually believe we're going to start to see the emergence of a new C-level officer in organizations. And so I look at things probably a little bit too much through a technology lens, but this is a little bit of a technology analogy. When I showed the graphic of Web 1, and you looked at, okay, well, who in an organization was responsible for that? It was someone called the Chief Information Officer, the CIO. And then you went to Web 2, which was the social web, things were different. And we realized that the skills of the CIO were not sufficient. And so we created a new C-level position. It's called the Chief Digital Officer, okay? And they were the ones that spun up websites and did all this other stuff. I think as we move into Web 3, you're going to see the emergence of yet another C-level officer. And I'm calling it the Chief Digital Asset Officer, the CDAO, which is, you know, kind of cute, DAO, right? I'm very witty. But I think this is an important concept because these are attributes that historically no one has demonstrated. And I don't think there's really degrees that are going to say, okay, if you want to go be the Chief Digital Asset Officer, this is what your career curriculum needs to be. I think passion and interest are going to be what propel people into that new C-level position. And I think in the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to really start to see that position expand dramatically.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris and Chike. So one question I have is institutional adoption increasing, with currency? What can I do with crypto? Could I pay taxes with it? Could I, get payments? What could I do with cryptocurrency as regards to institutional adoption?
So I'll take a first run, and then Chike, would love your perspective, because I think you, with your crypto and your payment process intersection, probably are going to be more eloquent than me on this one. But I think we're starting to see this notion of crypto as a form of payment. Colorado is talking about accepting Bitcoin for taxes. It feels like in a span of about 5 days, at least 3 states came out with something along those similar lines. The weird thing right now is you can use it for that, and I'm not an economist, so I don't have the right terminology here, but it's almost like you can use it for that first payment, but not for the second. So a dollar bill is really useful because I pay someone a dollar bill, they can pay their vendor a dollar bill, their vendor can pay their employee in a dollar bill, right? So the dollar bill just can live through that entire value chain. It doesn't feel like we're quite there in Bitcoin yet. So maybe I pay you in Bitcoin, but then your first action is to figure out how do you turn that Bitcoin into a US dollar because you want to go buy lunch and your lunch place doesn't take Bitcoin. So I think it's when you're going to start to see those second and third transactions in an economic value chain, all accepting Bitcoin. And so when using Bitcoin as that payment all the way through the chain, you're really going to start to see a lot of adoption, because right now it feels a little bit, I don't know, single transaction, and we need to get to multiple transaction.
Okay, so this was the one question I was hoping to avoid. because I'm sitting here as Visa Crypto, and I don't want to say anything that does not represent the company. So I would respond to this from a personal point of view, right? So you can't ever use this against Visa, right? So that's a great question. I mean, institutional adoption it's exponentially on the rise, right? For those of you who know El Salvador has adopted Bitcoin as a legal tender, which means you can transact, you can pay, you can do everything in Bitcoin. Now, personally, I think that, and of course we know that there are still, a lot of gray areas in terms of regulations, and until we get there, it would be difficult for adoption to increase. But in my opinion, I think the sweet spot right there is stable coins, right? You can convert your Bitcoin to stable coin and you can transact using that. And the reason why that's important is, like I mentioned, the stable coin is pegged to fiat, right? So if you convert from Bitcoin to, say, USDC or DAI or GUSD, whatever, you know that 50 USDC is equivalent to $50 US, right? So if you're paying with stable coin, that value is the same as you paying with the US dollar. Now, would there be a higher adoption or penetration of stable coins over crypto? I think so, partly because at some point, the speculative nature of crypto will make it, of course, a little bit more difficult. Now, imagine paying for something with 1 Bitcoin at 30,000, and then you make that payment and you turn around and all of a sudden Bitcoin is now at 60,000. Do you ask for 30,000 back? So I think stable coins may end up being, at least for now, until the ecosystem evolves to the point where we can actually use or stabilize or regulate or whatever it is that we need to do. Stable coins would be, in my opinion, the easier method of payment that people will understand and that people would more easily adopt, because there is something that there's a point of reference for them in terms of that.
All right, picking back from what you said, I'd really love you to explain the difference between stable coins and Bitcoins, for some people who might not understand, so they could have a full picture.
Litecoin, Dogecoin, Shiba Inu, all of that, right? Those are speculative, right? The value, you wake up today, it's different. Tomorrow it could be something else, all of that. So it fluctuates based on whatever is going on or whatever is affecting the market, right? Stable coins, on the other hand, are pegged to, like I talked about, they are pegged to a known resource. It could be fiat, it could be a natural resource. So if you have a stable coin pegged to gold, right? The value of the stable coin is the same value as what gold trades at, right? If it's pegged to the euro, it has the same exact value as €1. If it's pegged to the British pound, it has the same exact value as the British pound. If it's pegged to the US dollar, it has the exact same value as the US dollar, right? I'll throw this out and then you guys will have to delete this. So the bulk of my savings actually is in stable coins, right? I don't leave anything in my bank account except for rent or whatever. Partly because many of these exchanges will give you higher APRs if you stake your stable coins or your cryptocurrency on their platform, right? Now, because I know that if I have 50,000 USDC on an exchange, that's equivalent to 50,000 US dollars, right? And regardless of what happens to Bitcoin and Ethereum and every other thing else, it will still be 50,000, period, right? It's not going to change. The value does not fluctuate like Bitcoin and the rest of them. So it's not speculative, which is why they're called stable coins, right? So I think it has a lower entry barrier to entry for people who are confused about cryptocurrency than speculative ones, if that makes sense.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask, what is like the real-time conversion rates, from Bitcoin to the US dollar? Because that's actually one of the issues people have with regular transactions. The bank's taking like 2 business days, 3 business days. Recently, there was a grant offered, I think the HEF grant, and on the Delgado app, we have a lot of students complaining, I've seen mine, when am I going to get mine? So is that an issue Bitcoin, poses to solve, a problem Bitcoin poses to solve? Is there like a real-time conversion rate, or with transactions, do they go as the speed of light immediately, or are they subjected to this time frames of 2 days, 3 days with different banks and all of that?
So Chris, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll take a run at it, and then I'll throw enough uncertainty, and I'm sure you can eloquently tie my thoughts together here. I think there's a few things going on. One, my general experience is that when dealing with Bitcoin, you can settle quite quickly. That's one of the advantages. When you buy Bitcoin on a centralized exchange, you can effectively instantaneously convert US currency or any national fiat into Bitcoin and pretty much get an instant settlement and instant Bitcoin. Where it gets a little bit nuanced is some of the legacy financial regulations that we put in place for everything from anti-terrorism to trying to eliminate criminal activity, et cetera. And it comes down to a lot of know your customer type criteria, and then also certain limits and thresholds about how quickly you can move money around. And so I think the intersection of some of those financial rules and intentional slowdownness, to make up a word, might be what you're referencing, but at more of a consumer level, I would expect all of us could, if we hang up off this call within 15 minutes, convert $100 into Bitcoin. It's that larger threshold and some of the more nuanced use cases that seem to really start to get hung up, and maybe even some international transfers could be falling under that as well. But that's been my general take. I don't study this in depth, but that's my general take.
All right.
So just to add to that, yes, you're right. So part of the appeal of blockchain technology is the fact that it helps to minimize, if not eliminate, the third party, the intermediary who, takes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days to complete a transaction, right? So like I talked about, part of the reason why, crypto adoption is high in emerging markets is for people who trade, who purchase goods, whatever from, say, China or wherever else, they have to go through banks. They sometimes have to wait 3 weeks for a transaction to go through before their goods could be shipped out to them. With Bitcoin, I could just send it to your wallet and you can get it right there and then, right? Keyword, can get it right there and then. Does not mean you're getting it immediately, right? But what the blockchain does is it takes away the need for intermediaries that delay the process of financial services. So that's one significant appeal of blockchain technology.
Awesome. So with intermediaries taken out of the picture, that also equals to less costs, extra service charge and service fee, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, right. Well, yeah. Yes, but not completely. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say yes, but I mean, intermediaries provide a valuable function. So in the example of shipping, like we just talked about, there's this whole notion of trade finance and escrow agents and things like that. So if I'm going to manufacture something in China and ship it to the US, and maybe I've got to front some money, but it's going to be on a ship that's going to take 2 weeks to show up. How do I know that everyone does the right thing? I mean, one of the fallacies of crypto is that we act as if intermediaries are inherently bad. And they're not bad as long as they provide a service and it's not exorbitant, the fees they extract for that service. So trade finance and helping grease the wheels of international trade is a net positive. Now, are the ways that we can do it that are less expensive? Could you automate some of that holding and escrow functions? Yeah, possibly. But again, it comes down to what's the risk you're willing to take? What's the recourse you have if your counterparty doesn't do what you expect? How do you settle disputes? And that's where I was trying to bring in the point about things are going to feel different in the Web3 and the crypto world than they do right now, because the same way you resolve a dispute is not going to be the same way. And people may be comfortable with it, they may not be. So intermediaries serve a valuable function, and we got to figure out the right corollary to them in the digital world.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So y'all, we have the question and answer session right now. If you have questions, you could put that in the chat, or you could raise your hands and it will give you an opportunity to ask your questions. I know we've heard so much and we've learned so much. So while waiting for your response on the chat, I will just go on with my questions till, someone really shows an interest to ask a question. So now we know the world is moving towards green and clean energy, and I really want to know where crypto is, the whole mining process, of cryptocurrencies and maintaining it, in that regard. I know some cities that actually do have a lot of mining going on, speak about a lot of power usage, so where does, cryptocurrency, the system, the ecosystem stand in green energy and maintaining, a much more friendly climatic environment?
So do you want to take the first run at this one, or do you want me to?
Okay, I was going to say, Chris, that was for you. So actually the power consumption, right, or energy consumption of mining has been a big issue for climate change advocates, right, for good reason. However, though, you also start to see that as the ecosystem matures, that there are, more protocols and more, layers that are more green than, what was originally there, right? So Bitcoin mining, of course, was very, energy
intensive,
intensive. Yes, thank you for the word. Ethereum as well. I think that the second Ethereum 2.0 is supposed to take care of some of those issues. So Solana, there are a lot of these newer layer 2 protocols and blockchains that have taken that into consideration and are making sure that they address those issues moving forward. And as as the ecosystem, matures and grows, I think that would be something that would be addressed even further.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and if we could hang on to that point for 1 second, because I think there's a big public policy element to this as well that's underappreciated right now. And I'm going to speak about this from my context of living in Texas, where a year ago, I think a lot of you know, we had this major power outage and failure of our electrical grid. And most of the electric grid here in the United States is in the back half of its expected life cycle. So these big power lines you see, they're expected to last for 50 years. Most of them are on, year 26 onward. And so that's why, not to go too political, but that's why things about Build Back Better or other things like that are really interesting, because there is an infrastructure problem here in the US. And you can address that through maybe some government investment, or you could also look at it through economic incentives. And so to put that in my Texas context, Bitcoin does require a meaningful amount of energy. These other things are going to require a meaningful amount of energy. That is not inherently bad. What matters is how you build everything else around it. So if you can incentivize the construction or the replacement of the power grid by creating an incentive for a Bitcoin miner to put a farm near a major city, and you can construct incentives where they maybe do more mining at night when the draw of the city is lower and vice versa, you can actually start to rethink how you create base demand on the grid, how you can incentivize that long-term creation of power plants, and how you can incentivize the replacement of essential infrastructure. Because part of the reason the energy community is so out of kilter is there's no real incentive to go build new power plants. If you're meeting the demands of today, why go build another power plant to just add more energy and drive the price of energy down? You got to really think through the economic incentives of what's going to make people do things, and then how can you create variable based demand, which is what Bitcoin, these other things can do, that will allow us to rethink the economics of rebuilding our power infrastructure. It's going to be incredibly important as you then look at the electrification of the automotive industry.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. If you have questions, please put that in the chat. You could raise your hands up. So now this question is based on the risk factor. As an individual, if I decide to rather put my money in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, rather than putting it in the bank, after a year, you only get like 1%, 2% interest on it, compared to Bitcoin, where you can have, like 100% turnover, we've seen situations where we have popular figures, monopolize the system. Someone like an Elon Musk could just post something about Dogecoin, and then the worth of Dogecoin really escalates and, rises. And then tomorrow he's like, I'm not using that anymore. And then it just sinks and goes down. So, how is cryptocurrency independent of, the external players, or is it like as authentic as the dollar? No one has like the monopoly over the value of a dollar. It is standard, it is accepted. But things like cryptocurrency, if Elon Musk makes a tweet, the value could increase. So is crypto is it independent of external players? I don't know if you try to get my question. I don't know if I'm wording it perfectly. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I'll take an initial run at that. I think it depends on the coin. I think something like Solana, for example, it's something that we haven't talked about yet today. Chike had a passing reference to it. I think that's a fascinating token. And I think it has value independent of a big spokesperson like Elon Musk. And it comes back to my point of, do you have a thesis of why a token should appreciate in value? Solana is very energy efficient, and it has a theoretical, and I do theoretical in air quotes, throughput of 40,000 transactions per second. That's a ton of transactions. And so when you look at those two things, okay, energy efficient, high speed, it's developing a ecosystem, people building around it. there's an underlying reason to believe that that token will appreciate in value. And then I would contrast that again with Dogecoin, which is basically living on a bunch of people pumping and Elon Musk drunk tweeting at night memes. That's not a good thesis to make a big investment. So it really comes down to, can you articulate why something should appreciate in value? There are underlying things beyond just a couple personalities on Twitter. If yes, it might be worth considering investing. If no, I would run away.
Awesome. Yeah, Chike.
I agree with Chris, right? So this is where you have to understand the difference between utility tokens, or tokens that provide utility or value, and the meme coins, or the meme tokens, right? Those that have no value, right? And the question is, so like I'm not a financial advisor. I cannot tell you what to go invest in and what not to invest in, but you have to do your own research. And there are some people who would tell you, if you are in for the short-term gain or profit, you cannot not look at meme coins, right? And there are some that if you're in it for the long game, look at the utility tokens, right? So it's important to understand why you're investing and what you're investing in. And that I think should provide some, confidence in what and how you choose to move forward.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Chike, Ukaegbu, and Chris Muse. If you all have more questions, I would drop their information. You could, follow them on LinkedIn, or, look at them wherever digital space they are on. We'll actually be around enough pretty soon. I just want to give a brief background on the two amazing panelists we had today. First of all, Chike Ukaegbu, he's my first cousin, and he's been here for a long time. So he's like a mentor. He's a mentor to me, if you get look up to so much, because he's achieved a lot. He's a Colin Powell Fellow. He was a one-time presidential aspirant in Nigeria. And yeah, he has accomplished so much under his belt. I'm just so privileged to have, someone like that in my bloodline, and someone like that I could look up to. And yeah, that's Chike. Thank you so much, Chike, for your time and take out of your very busy schedule. It wasn't easy trying to get him on here, but I'm glad you agreed to do this for us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And then, of course, I was opportune to be in a cryptocurrency briefing with the treasurer of the state of Louisiana, Mr. John Scooter. And it's a new committee set up, trying to see how we can push the state forward in regarding cryptocurrencies and, get into that ecosystem. And I was opportune to meet Mr. Chris Muse out there. And it was really amazing. It was informative. I got a lot of more knowledge because I'm a crypto enthusiast myself. So I'm glad you took out your time to, do this for us in a short notice and out of your very busy schedules. Chike works at Visa, and Ms. Chris actually also partners and works at IBM. These are really amazing companies, and it's just an honor to have you all on our platform at Delgado. I believe the students, yeah, we got another question. I'll take one more before I go. I believe the students actually have gotten so much from this. We have faculty, we have staff. I heard our chancellor was on here. I don't know if she's still on here in person of Dr. Steb. It's an honor to have her with us today. And I'll just take this question. Any crypto coin or crypto exchange backed by FDIC? Is there any crypto coin or crypto exchange backed by the FDIC? Yeah, Chris.
So if you look at the exchanges, because this is a really interesting question. It's not so much by FDIC, but a lot of them do carry insurance. So there's a liability policy that many exchanges will have in case of fraud or hacking or whatnot. And this actually is a concept that extends beyond cryptocurrency. You can buy insurance instruments for IT operations, for data hacks, things of that nature. So there are some recovery mechanisms out there possible. The other thing that I would just kind of point out briefly is the government in general. If the concern is around theft, the government is becoming incredibly sophisticated at tracking down criminals. So the Colonial Pipeline hack, where there was a ransom paid in Bitcoin, that money was recovered. We just saw the FBI seize billions of Bitcoins from a hack that was, I want to say, almost a decade ago. And that's why people say Bitcoin's actually a miserable currency for criminals, because you can track it. And we just needed new tools to figure it out. And we're rapidly getting to that point. So I think people over stress on the risk of theft of cryptocurrency. The recovery mechanisms are actually surprisingly robust.
Awesome. Thank you. Chike.
I think Chris covered that, except that there are a few stable coins that I know actually have reserves. What they have in the market, liquidity has to match the reserves they have for them to work. So they're not necessarily backed by FDIC, but there is some insurance or some guarantee that, you know, it's not scandalous, to say the least. Yeah.
Right. That's very important. All right. Thank you so much for your time. Before I actually call on advisor, Miss Amy, I quickly want to make these announcements. This event was put up by the Student Government Association, you know, in the Black History Month, had really amazing panel events. And I'm glad we were able to do this. I believe in empowerment, and knowledge is power. I feel as humans, the world is ever going forward with, you know, digitalization of things, of value. And it's awesome if we can be among the forerunners of this new ecosystem. And that's why I thought it important to educate the students as the student body president on cryptocurrency and where the world is going, so we won't be left behind. You know, when I campaigned as the vice president of policy, one of my motto was making sure no one is left behind. So I think I'm doing that right. So we have two more events. We have the STEM, Appreciating Black Pioneers in STEM. That's another event by the student government. I'm a STEM major, I'm a civil engineering student. So I'm passionate about, you know, Black people, especially on minorities, involvement in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And then I would really love to see you all in your numbers turn on for that. We'll talk about the space, obstacles faced, you know, triumph, and how you can actually get involved with that, because most people really are not aware of opportunities, and you cannot be more than you know. So that's why I'm glad we're able to have this panel meeting today. And I believe that we've gotten so much knowledge and information. So I would, before I hand over to Miss Amy, I would really love to ask Mr. Chris, where do we, you know, how do we find your materials? How do we follow you so that to get more news information?
Sure. So I will in the chat post a couple links, but I'm fairly active on Twitter at Moose Chris. And then I also have a series of Medium articles, which I just posted a link to, and LinkedIn. But I'll put all three of those back into the chat, and would welcome any follow-on questions over time.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. Chike Ukaegbu, how do we connect with you?
Sure. So Chike Ukaegbu on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and Telegram and Discord. Just name it, you'll find me there. That does not mean that I'm always active on a lot of them. LinkedIn may be my most active platform, but you will definitely find me, and if you reach out, I do respond.
Thank you so much. I believe your name is peculiar, just like mine. There isn't any other Chike Ukaegbu that anyone can find. It's got to be you. All right, thank you for your time. Over to you, Miss Amy.
I don't have much to add other than to thank the esteemed presenters and to thank Melvin for bringing together such a great panel of presenters for this. So thank you to all of the faculty, staff, and students that have participated in this. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see you at the next event. So have a great rest of your week.
All right, have a great one, y'all.
Thank
See
you
you on
all.
Thursday, 12 p.m. Have a good day.
All right.